Hey everyone, so this is episode 5 of 11/22/63, and it's called The Truth. And so basically, the episode starts off with Jake, running behind Sadie um, as she makes her way to upstairs and out the door. And Jake, stops her in the middle of the street and is like, "Can we at least talk?" But Sadie doesn't want to because she feels like he lied to her. And so she basically just demands to know what the table's all about. And he says they were actors, but of course she doesn't really believe that, and she slaps him and says that everything he has said was a lie. And she asks him how to look at her and tell her that again, and kind of keep like a straight face about it, or a plausible face about it. But he can't. So she demands he stay away from her before she leaves. And Jake goes back into the house and sees the food Sadie had left and throws it away. And then the opening credits start, and then it shows Jake back in 2016, before he went into the rabbit hole. And Jake is seen teaching his high school English teaching class teaching the Odyssey. And when it's clear that no one's really paying attention to it, he asks them the question of, if they could go back in time, A, would you, and B, what would you do? What part of history would you want to change? One kid asked how they were to get back in time, and Jake's like, well, it doesn't matter how the fuck you get back in time. It's just that you're able to. Just forget the mechanics of how you got there. Just think of, just remember that you can. Just know that you can at this point. Just know that you can. But the kid's like, no, well, how the fuck are you gonna get back there? And starts spouting off this, mechanical or technical shit about how you could possibly get back there. And it's like, Jake's like, fucking forget it. Just know that you can. Where would you go back in time to change history? And what would you do? And basically what would you do? One person says that they would go back and kill Hitler. Another says they would go back and kill Saddam Hussein. The last kid says that they will kill a homeworker so they don't have to read this book anymore. And then back in 1963, Jake is in Deke's office is getting a scolding from Simmons. Simmons says that the contract he signs has a moral clause in it, and basically Jake asks if he's fired, and Deke's like, well, it would be easier for you if you just resign so that you could, get another teaching position, because if you get fired, people are gonna wonder why you got fired, and then B, because of that, they won't want to hire you. So he's like, just go out to the main office, to where Miss Mimi is, and sign the termination papers. So he does, and well, no, first before he does, Jake's not really that happy about having to resign. He's like, well, what about all accomplished? Like, the kitty who was able to get to acts and plays, and what about the kid who I taught poetry, for God's sake? But and wonders if and asks if that counts for anything. But Deke feels like his hands are tied, so that's when he's like, go out to Miss Mimi, sign the termination papers, and be on your way. So Jake goes out, sign the termination papers, but Miss Mimi can't find them, so he just says goodbye. And a flashback of him and Al, next. Jake asks Al if he saw Oswald shoot at Walker, but Al says no, because he only lasted until December 3rd, 1962. He didn't even make it to 1963. to January 1st, 1963. So there was no way he could know for sure um, if Oswald shot Walker. Back in 1963, Bill and Jake are outside Walker's house, talk a little bit in the car before they get out and go into the tree line a little bit. Jake then tells Bill the next evening at 9 p.m. They are to return there where they are standing because there's a church service that because there's a church near Walker's house, and so there's a church service that lets out at about 9 p.m. that the next night, and so it's there's a theory that Oswald planned for 9 p.m. the next night so that he could escape into the crowd when it let out. And so Jake explains that when Oswald takes a shot, Walker is sitting at his desk in the room that's facing them. So Bill says it's not an easy shot, but it's plausible. But Jake says Oswald missed anyway, and Walker only got shrapnel in his arm. Then they need to find a spot where they can't be seen the next night. And Bill asks the question, the very valid question in my opinion. Well, why would Oswald shoot Walker? Walker hates Kennedy just as much as Oswald does now. And Jake says it because it's the same gun with the same bullets and the same used to it's the same bullets and the same gun that was used to kill Kennedy, and it doesn't matter why he does it. It only matters if he does it. Well, it kind of does matter as to why he does it, because if there's no actual reason to shoot him, then there would be no reason to go all the way over there just to shoot him. I mean, most people have a reason to do it. Whether you agree with it or understand it doesn't matter. The people almost always have a reason to do it. Whether it's like whether they believe it's a religious reason or just like because this person wronged me, or because I just don't like this dude. I don't know. It doesn't matter. People almost always have a reason for doing something, and if they don't have a reason to do it, there's no viable reason to go out and fucking shoot them later on. Like, there's no reason to do it. I mean, people almost always have a reason, so it kind of does matter as to why he does it. After I watched the episode, I looked up on Wikipedia, or I mean, I guess Wikipedia's were not really a source, but I mean, at least on there it says that the Morshields testified after the fact, after Oswald died that Oswald shot Walker was because Oswald didn't like Walker. What his reasons for not liking Walker are doesn't matter, because he just doesn't like Walker. That's a viable reason. That's all fucking Jake had to fucking say, but he didn't say it, so anyway. So back in Dallas, Bill is listening to the Oswalds when Jake comes in, and kind of gets Bill to stop listening to them for a second. And Jake asks him various questions about the cars, and the flashlights and stuff, so that they don't run into the past trying to push back. Bill then asks what happens after the next night, and Jake says he guesses he will kill Oswald, anyone else that's involved. Then he says that he will go back to Maine after that, so they can walk through the rabbit hole and see if they changed anything for the better. And Bill asks if he can go with Jake through the rabbit hole, but Jake says nothing until Bill realizes he won't be able to come with Jake, because I mean, everything there's so much that's different in 2016 than in 1963, because for one, there's a lot more technology. Like there's cell phones, laptops, and just computers in general, and TV, better TVs, and the thing called the internet, because back then they didn't have the internet. In 1960 they didn't have the internet. They didn't have the internet until the 1990s, like early 1990s at best. So that's like 30 years away at least. So yeah, so then there's all this stuff that's different, and there's newer, better car. I don't want to say better, but there's newer cars, and it's just everything is so much different in general, without having stopped Kennedy from being assassinated. That's just different. And if you stop Kennedy from being assassinated, there's there's that added layer. Everything else is going to be different. So it's going to be so overwhelming for Bill in the first place, because at least Jake can handle deal the technology that's different. It's just the aspect of Kennedy still being alive that's going to be different. So yeah, there's this a whole bunch of stuff that's going to be different that Jake can't really bring him back for. And then Jake says he will leave Al's book with the sports bets in it, so that Bill can make bets and eventually get a house and everything. And then when they pack everything in the car, Jake gives Bill a gun, tells him that he needs to go back to Jody that night. Jake needs to go back to Jody that night. So Jake Amberson the teacher can be erased. Bill asks about Sadie, and Jake says he fooled himself into thinking that he could be with Sadie, and he came back for a reason. So at least it seems for the time being that he realizes that he shouldn't have been with Sadie, and that he is not going to pursue Sadie anymore. Sadie is then seen getting out of a car and going into her house with someone watching her. It seems like someone's watching her from a bush across the street. Then back in Jake's house, he is packing his things up and destroying the tapes of Oswald's when he sees a picture of him and Sadie and throws it in the trash bag along with it. Then, as he's about to walk out the door, his phone rings. He hesitates by the door for 30 seconds or something like that, before he goes to the phone and answers it. And Johnny's on the line, and Johnny says that he thought a lot of what Jake said and wants to continue the conversation at Sadie's house. And Jake is shouting at Johnny, shouting Johnny's name as Johnny, sets the receiver down and walks over to Sadie, who has a hood over her head and blood on it, or what looks like blood anyway. It could honestly be ketchup. I think they had ketchup at this point. Anyway, so that's when the first commercial break comes on, and then after the commercial break on Hulu comes back, Jake calls Bill and tells him that it will just be Bill there later that night before running all the way to Sadie's house, even though Bill doesn't really understand. Then once at Sadie's house, he goes inside and is told Johnny and Sadie are in the dining room. Johnny is sitting down holding a gun, and Sadie still has a hood over her head with the blood on it. And Johnny takes the hood off, and there's this long, cut from right about here all the way down her right side of her cheek, or right side of her face, down to her chin, her jawline. And Johnny says that if Sadie only wanted some time to herself for a bit, that he would have allowed it. But then he tracked her down and saw that she dirtied herself, and Jake was the one who had done it. So Jake says he didn't have sex with her, but Johnny doesn't really believe that, because it's true. We know that he had sex with her, basically. In a previous episode, in the episode that he saw that Jake was given the pictures. But yeah, anyways, Johnny isn't really buying it and tells Jake not to lie to him. So Johnny forces Jake to kiss Sadie, and he does, and then Jake asks to bandage Sadie's face, but Johnny refuses, and Johnny pours a glass of bleach for Jake into a glass for Jake to drink, but Jake doesn't really drink it at first. or even pretends to drink it at first. And Jake says if Jake doesn't drink it, that Sadie will be punished. Sadie makes a glass bowl full of apples fall onto the floor and claims it as a mistake. But Johnny doesn't buy that either. And then as Johnny is talking, Sadie starts to laugh, and he's like, "Well," Johnny's like, "Well, there's nothing that's funny." But Sadie says, "Sure there is." And she says, asks him, or says to him, "All this because I told him your dirty little secrets." And she pauses and said, before he says, "Well, I didn't even tell him about your grandmother." And apparently, what she's talking about is that his grandmother continued to bathe him even though he was 12 until he was 12 or 13 years old. And apparently she was taken away because of Johnny, because of that fact. Then Johnny starts yelling at Sadie to shut up when the doorbell rings. And then it goes back to Dallas for a second, where Bill goes up to Marina and offers her a cigarette. As they smoke, they talk about pies and Bill's sister, and before Oswald comes out and sees the two smoking. And then before Bill leaves, Oswald asks if Bill ever read any of Karl Marx. And when Bill says he hasn't, Oswald gives him a book on either on Karl Marx or written by Karl Marx. And then it goes back to Sadie's house. Jake answers the door, and it's two students from the school delivering a prize Sadie won from a raffle. And Jake says, they asked Jake what he's doing there because they were kind of surprised to see him there. And he tells them to leave the basket on the doorstep, and then before he closes the door, he mouths to them. He doesn't actually say anything. He mouths it for them to call 911. And then Johnny tells him to lock the door, come back into the dining room, and when Jake sits down, he's like, "I hope you didn't tell the kids to call the police, because if you did, and I hear sirens, I'll cut Sadie's nose off." I'm just like, this dude, I don't know, it just seems really weird the way he is, like the way he threatens people. It comes off as like he hasn't even thought of a good threat to make, because I feel like any, I guess you could say, normal person would have come up with a better threat than cutting off their nose. I don't know. It just seems weird. It just seems kind of odd that you would threaten to cut someone's nose off. If anything, you're gonna just say, "I'm gonna shoot them in the forehead" or something. I mean, I don't know. That seems more normal to me, but I don't know. Maybe my version of normal is different than other people's version of normal. I don't know. Anyway. Johnny then continues to say that Jake will either drink the entire glass of bleach that he poured out, or it will be a bullet in Sadie's head. Which, again, goes back to Mike. Like, yeah, anyway. And Jake asked, how does he know Johnny, how does he know if Johnny won't put a bullet in her even if he drinks it? And Johnny says, "I won't do that because she's my wife." And Jake makes it look like he's about to drink it, but instead he throws the contents into Johnny's eyes, and so he grabs Sadie's hand, and they run into the living room, and then Johnny, follows them in there, and they kind of cower in the corner next to the sofa, and Johnny starts, shooting in the direction of them, but not exactly at them. And before he actually is able to shoot them, Jake takes off his watch and throws it in the direction of the TV and the television, and Johnny shoots at the television instead. So basically, when Johnny does that, Jake picks up a fire poker and hits Johnny in the temple with it. And Johnny drops the gun and stands there for like 30 seconds or so before Sadie picks up the gun and shoots Johnny in the chest, and Johnny falls on the couch. Then it goes. Then there was another commercial break before it comes back, and when it comes back from the commercial break, Sadie is then wheeled out of the house on a stretcher with a bandage on her face. As she's wheeled out, Jake wonders if there should be an IV, and one of the guys wheeling her out says nurses will do that at the hospital. And Jake is confused and is like, well, since you're paramedics, shouldn't you just give her one? And the guy's like, what are you talking about? I'm clearly confused. I'm not exactly sure when paramedics was a term used. I'm not sure about that, but so yeah, I'm not sure exactly when the term paramedics was started. I mean, the thought of the idea of paramedics being used has been used, I think, for like hundreds of thousands of years, but the actual term paramedic to be used for someone who transports people who have been hurt to the hospital, I don't think has been used as long. I think it's been only used for like the last 40-50 years, like since like the 70s, I think. So I don't know if it's like, because I know in Halloween, the 1978 version of Halloween, they used the term paramedics. I'm fairly certain they used the term paramedics, and this was 1978, so I'm fairly certain they've been using the term paramedic for at least the last 3 years or so, by the time the Halloween movie was made. So I'm not exactly sure when they actually started using the term paramedic. So I know I'm kind of getting off on a tangent here, but yeah, that's basically it though. I mean, so I'm assuming the reason why Stephen King put that in his book and allowed it to continue into this TV series is because of the fact that perhaps they most likely didn't use the term paramedic until like early 1970s at that. So I mean, at the earliest. So that's the only reason why I'm saying that. I mean, and that's why it's like that's probably the reason why Stephen King had had the whole paramedic thing be like a confusing term or something. I don't know. Anyway, so then they take her to a hospital in Dallas, and then a deputy by the last name Stevens questions Jake, but Jake's like, I need to get to the hospital. And the deputy continues to keep, trying to question him, but then Deke Simmons comes up and is like, and pretty much interrupts the conversation and gets it so that Jake can go to the hospital before giving a statement. And as they walk away, Simmons asks Jake if he killed Johnny, and Jake's like, yeah, I did. And Simmons says, good. I was like, okay, well then, where his ass stands. Anyway, so Bill Tails then is seen, waiting for Oswald to leave so he can tail him to Walker's house. And then back at the hospital, Jake waits for news on Sadie. A doctor by the last name of Jones comes in and tells everyone waiting for Sadie that she's in surgery and that it could be the breast, and she could be in there for the rest of the night since it goes beyond just cosmetics, since the cut was pretty deep. And a lot of people then volunteer to donate blood. And then in the next scene, which is sometime later, Stevens questions Jake about Sadie, and he tells him that Sadie ended the relationship, and he pretty much talks about the relationship in general. Jake explains that she broke up with him because he kept things from her, even though she was open about everything in her life. And then when Steven leaves, after Jake explains things, Steven says that he'll pray for Sadie, and basically saying that he's not going to pursue Jake as someone who did this to Sadie or anything. So then when Steven leaves, Jake sees the clock, and it's pretty much about 9 p.m. It's like a minute to 9. Then you see Bill outside Walker's house, and the church bells tolled 9 p.m. 9 tolls, or whatever you want to call them. Bill then looks at his watch, wondering where Lee is, and as everyone is coming out of the church across the street, Bill thinks he sees his dead sister Clara, and he runs after the woman, and after he catches up to the woman, makes her turn around and sees that it's not his sister Clara, he then hears the gunshot that he's been waiting for. And then it goes to commercial break, and then it comes back from a commercial break, and once it comes back from the commercial break, there's a camera that pans over the hospital waiting room, and as that does that, Al is speaking, kind of in a voiceover, saying that when a person goes to the past, everything they tell everybody will be a lie. And Al says that it's possible to forget who you are, and because of that, you'll want to reach out and make a connection. Al says that he made that mistake. He doesn't elaborate on it, but he says he made that mistake. He continues by saying, if you get too close, to forget what you came for. And as kind of as Jake is staring off into space, General Walker is brought into the hospital. And that brings Jake out of his kind of reverie or whatever. And as Walker passes, he and Jake kind of make eye contact for like a second or two. And then Jake calls Bill and asks what happened. And Jake says he missed it. He missed everything. And that he never saw Oswald there. He explains that he thought he saw his sister Clara. And he explains that his sister's body was never found. Like that's ever an excuse. Like, I mean, you're pretty certain you're pretty certain that she's actually dead. And as Bill tells Jake, Jake just drops the receiver and lets it hang there, and then just walks away. And as he was walking down the hallway, the Dr. Jones comes up to Jake, says that he's sorry that he and that they thought they could do a lot more, and they could, leading Jake to think that Sadie is dead. But the doctor says that they could only do so much, but there would be a bad scar. Jake then runs to Sadie's room and hugs her. Even just as the doctor's explains that I'm not saying that she's dead, I'm just saying that we won't be able to fix the scars as much as we thought we could. And she says that he saved her life, but he says she saved his. Jake says he can't live without her, but Sadie's confused, he can't do this without her. Sorry, but Sadie's confused. And he says he lied to her and won't ever do it again. And he says he has something to tell her. Then he drops the bombshell that he's from the future and that he was born in 1978. Sadie's first reaction is to laugh, but then realizes he isn't joking. She asks if he's really an English teacher, and he's like, yeah, I am. And she asks where he's really from. He says, I'm actually from Lisbon, Maine. That much is true. And she they kind of question each other a little bit, and she's like, the things that they question each other about are like where she's from, and she said, I'm from East Texas, I grew up in East Texas. He asks her where she went to school. She says she went to Vanderbilt. She asks where he went to school, and he says he went to Bates. He says he loves her. And she's like, well, that's too soon for that, don't you think? It's like, no, it's not too soon for me. And I think she said she loves him back. I don't quite remember because I didn't write it down, but I think she said she loves him back. And then he asks if she always wanted to be a librarian. She's like, no, but I always liked books. and he asks what her favorite book was, and before she can answer, he guesses From Here to Eternity, and she's like, no, it's too savvy for her. And then that's kind of like, the end of their little, conversation, or the conversation you hear them um, talk. That's the end of the conversation you hear. As much of the conversation you hear, because you kind of see the camera like panning backwards, so you still see them, but you don't hear their conversation. So that's the end of that whole episode. Yeah, I figured. When I was first watching this episode, I figured they really weren't going to. They really weren't going to have Bill see if Oswald was the one who shot him, because they still have 3 more episodes to do. Like, they still have 3 entire episodes to do. And so I assumed that basically they're gonna make it kind of ambiguous that they can still like kind of have at least 2 more episodes worth of continuity before they get to the actual day JFK was assassinated in the last episode. Because when I was first watching the series, I figured the last episode was going to be Jake trying to stop Oswald from killing Kennedy, like have that whole episode centered around that. And so when I was watching this 5th episode, I figured they really weren't gonna have show Oswald actually shooting at Walker, because there's still, like I said, 2 more episodes until the final episode, so they kind of have to propel the story a little bit more forward, and they kind of have to fill the next 2 episodes up with something before Jake tries to stop Oswald from killing Kennedy in the last episode. Because I figured that's going to be the main focus of the last episode. So anyway, but yeah, so far it seems like Bill is really, really fucking up. I get that he couldn't really help it, because he couldn't really help the fact that it was the past pushing back, but he should have realized that it was the past pushing back, and that he really wasn't seeing his sister Clara, because if he hadn't seen her since she had quote unquote gone missing, then it most likely isn't her, and it's just the past playing tricks on you, so you wouldn't be able to see if Oswald was the one who actually shot Walker. So yeah, I will say this for the people who are watching me recap the series. I feel like this is the start. This is the beginning of. This is definitively the point where things start fucking spiraling out of control, and where you can see this is the point where this is how certain things happen in the next 2 episodes. So I will say that. I won't say exactly what, because obviously I've seen this before, and I don't want to give any spoilers out to anybody who's actually watching this with me for the first time. So I don't really want to give out any details if you're actually watching this for the first time. But yeah, so I don't know. So yeah, that's just me. I thought this was a pretty good episode. I figured, like I said, I figured they really weren't gonna show. When I first watched this, I really figured that they weren't gonna show if Oswald was the one who shot at Walker, not killed Walker. I was gonna say killed Walker, but I was like, anyway. So yeah, I figured I was hoping that they would show it, but I figured for the most part that they weren't gonna show it. And I mean, it was a long shot, no pun intended, that they really weren't gonna show it. So, um, and I'm glad that Sadie, for the most part, is okay, even though she has this huge ass scar on the side of her face. I mean, I'm glad she's okay. I didn't really want her to die. I think she's a nice person. I just don't like the fact that Jake got involved with Sadie and is obviously continuing to be involved with Sadie, um, even though Al specifically warned him not to do so. Especially even with Bill, like I feel like, especially with future events, I feel like future events that haven't been shown yet, I feel like Jake really just doesn't like to listen about on things. So I don't know. I really don't like the fact that Jake just continues not to heed Al's advice. I mean, I know it's easier to have help, but there's a reason why Al said this. It's because he's speaking from experience. I mean, he may not have divulged the what his particular situation, but clearly he's speaking from experience. So I mean, I would have loved Jake to have done this by himself, and I feel like it would have been a like completely different series. I mean, and I would have loved to see how he would have been able to do this without help, as opposed to with help. I mean, I know Stephen King wrote it like that, but I mean, I would have loved to see it like, with, I don't know. I kind of wish that like Stephen King had written an alternate version of it, like an alternate version of this, so that we could see what it would have been like without could have been like with Jake not having help and not getting involved with a woman. So I would have liked to see that personally, but I mean, that's just me. Anyway, so with that said, please don't hesitate to discuss this in the comments below. If you like this video, like this particular video, hit like. And if you want to see more videos of me recapping TV shows, hit subscribe, and so you can get notifications on when I will upload new videos. And with that, I will see you guys in the next 11/22/63 episode. Bye.